Okay, so we're gonna talk about the awkward meeting that you're gonna have with your client the first time. Or if you're the client watching, we're gonna talk about that first awkward meeting that you're gonna have with your architect. And what I'm gonna cover today is how to make that meeting less awkward, first of all, and how to make it productive and informative for both parties. So if you're interested in knowing more, then please keep on watching. So I'm gonna share my screen here of a checklist that I wanna go through, but I'm also gonna have a PDF version of that in the description if you wanna download that. So let's get started. All right, so I'm breaking this into two parts. So what the client needs to prepare for the meeting and then what the architect needs to prepare for the meeting. So let's start with the client first. So before you get on a call with a client, I always feel like my clients get very nervous before they talk to me because they just don't know what to expect and what to prepare, and they're afraid that I'm going to ask them questions that they don't know the answer to, and vice versa. You know, I'm also worried that they're going to ask me something that I'm not prepared for. So to ease everybody's mind, I got this checklist here, and it starts with the client actually writing a lifestyle brief. And when I say writing, ideally you can write it on a Google Doc if you feel like it. You know, don't sweat the grammar, don't sweat the format. Just start typing freestyle what kind of information you think are going to be helpful to the architect. For example, how many people are going to be living in this house? Is it a family of 4? Is it a single person? Do you have any pets? Do you like to entertain? Do you have a big family that comes every weekend to hang out there? Do you work from home? Do you need a specific type of rooms that's not like a typical in every house? For example, I was talking to a client the other day actually, and he is a video editor and content creator, and he needed a studio. Like actually the biggest room in the house was a studio. And I was talking to him and his wife, and then we were talking about something, and then she said, oh, you know, actually for his studio, can we have a 6-foot door for the storage there, because he has all these heavy equipments and all these lights and stuff, and when we have a 3-foot door, it's really hard to get things in and out. I was like, oh my god, thank you for sharing that, because I would have never known that kind of information. So anything that you think is a little bit out of the ordinary that the architect is gonna find useful, then just type it, put it there in the project. So second thing, location. So for the location brief, it's always very helpful to get the address of the project, especially if you're doing work internationally or even here in the US. I mean, the US is a massive country, so the climate is very different from state to state, even from city to city. So always have an address ready of your property and a site survey, ideally both in PDF and CAD. And what I mean by a site survey is, you know, have a surveyor go and measure the lot, and they will give you, you know, locations for utility and stuff like that. So that's a very, very important document to have for your architect. And if you have it in CAD, even better, like I said, because the architect can literally just take that file, it's a working file, and they can just like start tracing on top of it and add in the actual building on top of it. So it saves them a lot of time. The other thing that you can have if you're doing a renovation and it's not a ground up, if it's a renovation, most likely your house is probably listed on Zillow at some point. So on Zillow, it's very important to, you know, go there and see some pictures of the interior and just kind of get familiar with the project. So if you send that to the architect, they're gonna have a lot more information to work with. And if you don't have a Zillow listing, then just take a lot of pictures or do a video, or just like walk around and do a video, so you can have that ready for your architect if they ask any questions about the space. All right, after that, you should have a design brief. A design brief is actually a description of the project. Are we building an ADU? Are we building a 5,000 square foot home? Are we building a 2-story home? Are we building a 1-story home? Do you need a 5-bedroom house? Do you need a 3-bedroom house? As I mentioned earlier in the lifestyle, do you work from home? Do you need a designated office? Do you have a preference in terms of style? Are you more traditional? Are you transitional? Are you modern style? Anything in terms of aesthetic that would be very helpful. Which brings me to my next point, which is inspiration. Actually, inspiration is so crucial that a lot of people don't even think that's a necessary step, but it is extremely necessary. And this is a step where I want you to really spend most of your time, because it's gonna save you so much back and forth with your architect. It's gonna save you so much time and money on revisions, because the more inspiration photos you have, the more the architect is gonna be able to deliver that exact same thing. For example, if you don't have a specific photo, I'm just gonna assume that you like a certain things. But if you show me something, then there's no way I'm gonna mess it up. And a little trick here, if you have time, I would suggest you go on Pinterest or on House. I prefer Pinterest. So you set up your boards by room. For example, have a board just for living room, have a board just for kitchen, have a board just for facades, and at least have 10 photos per board, because with 10 photos, I can start seeing a pattern and a style, and it's easy for me to spot it. But if you just have like one picture here and one picture there, I don't even know what do you like about the picture. A lot of times I see a picture that a client sent me and I think they would like, for example, the layout of the picture, but eventually they're like, no, we just like the color of the counter. I'm like, what? You should have told me that. But you know, if you just take some pictures and like annotate it, actually there is something, there's a website called Concept Board, and it's really easy. You just drag and drop your photos and you write a note. Then that way you can just like put an arrow and I know, okay, you're looking at the counter, you're not really looking at the flooring. So then I know what to copy from that photo. And you know, some architects are going to be able to get your vision and what you're trying to do right away, but some architects are not going to be able to read between the lines and they need to see it to implement it. So very, very important step. Don't forget your inspiration photo. All right. Next, you need to have a timeline in mind. So for the timeline is usually I try to first ask about where are you in design. Some clients are gonna come super early in design where they're like, we have a local architect, but we haven't started working with them yet. We're just trying to bounce off ideas with you. We're just trying to get something on paper and we want you to kind of guide us through that. Some clients are gonna be like, well, you know what? We already have a plan. We already did a lot, but we don't like it. So we want you to help us fix it. Some clients are going to be like, we don't have anything. We want you to do everything from A to Z. So it's always good to know where they're at, because that way you know how prepared and how much baggage are they coming with. A lot of time they probably know so much about the project and you're kind of joining the project pretty late. So you're probably going to need a lot of catch up to do. So always ask about where are you in the process of this design. You should also ask them if they have any specific milestone or anything like a move-in date, or actually I had a client the other day telling me that she needed to start her construction in Miami before the hurricane season. So these people actually really plan their life around hurricanes. Some people, they plan their move-in date because the wife is pregnant and they need to move in before the baby comes. So all these milestones you need to share with your architect, because it's gonna really help them come up with a game plan and tell you if it's realistic or not. Okay, next one is the team. So if you're the client, you always need to have a point of contact. So for example, is it the husband who's gonna be taking care of, you know, all the back and forth with you, or is it the wife? You need to also share with the architect who's also part of the team. Like, do you already have engineers that are working with you? Do you have a contractor that's kind of helping you with pricing? Because the drawings that the architect is going to be producing for you, they need to be tailored towards a specific target. Like, who is going to end up with those drawings? Is it an engineer who's going to stamp it? Is it a GC? Is it a vendor, like a cabinet maker? So that way the architect would know how to structure their drawings. So you need to share that information. So after the team, we should probably have a budget in mind for design services. Now, a lot of clients, they come and they're like, well, my budget is $2 million to build this house. Then I think having a construction budget is good for the architect. And actually some architects, they charge like a percentage of construction. I don't think that's a smart way of pricing, because especially for somebody who does international work, like prices of construction are gonna vary by country, but my services and the amount of work I'm pouring into the project is the same whether it's in Beverly Hills or if it's in Ethiopia. My effort is still the same. So I don't think construction, basing your services, professional services on construction is very fair. But it's good to have that number. But what you should share with your architect is how much you're willing to pay for professional services, how much you're willing to pay the architect. Some people come in, they're like, you know, I only have $800. Can you do this plan for me for $800? Some people wouldn't even turn on their computers unless it's a 10K project. But, you know, it really varies. But at least you need to give them kind of a price or price range, and then you work from there. You know, is the $800 just for the first revision? Is it for the whole phase, for the whole schematic phase? So be very specific in terms of how much you're willing to pay the architect. because you don't want to be like sharing so much and then you're like, oh, you know, actually we charge 50K. I know architects that, you know, like we actually charge 120K for a full set of plans. A lot of architects do. So, and then you're like sitting there with your $800, like you don't know what to do with it. So it looks a little bit weird, and it's just, always try to talk about money as early as possible. Delaying not talking about money is doing a disservice to everybody. And then after the budget, you should talk about deliverables. So for the deliverables, probably you should talk about deliverables before you talk about budget, because for the deliverables, you want to tell your architect what you're looking for. I got clients coming to me and they're like, you know, we just want to look at a floor plan. Some clients come and they're like, we want you to do the whole package. Some clients, they just want to do the elevations. Sometimes I don't like when clients kind of try to constrain me into a specific deliverable, because they're like, no, I really just want to see the plan. But the way I work is I work in 3D. So if I'm gonna do a plan, I'm gonna do a 3D anyways, not for you, but for me. And if I do it for me, might as well share it with you. If I'm an architect and I do this for a living and I still need a 3D plan to really catch myself, then you sure as hell need to see that 3D plan. So, you know, it's like when you go to a doctor and you're like, you have a broken leg and you're like, the doctor is asking you to do an x-ray and you're like, you know what, I don't think we need an x-ray. Can you just tell me if my leg is broken? You know, I think it's swollen, so it's probably broken. You never say that to a doctor, so why do you say that to an architect? Let the architect do their process. Just ideally, if the budget allows, I know sometimes the budget doesn't allow to do the full package. Just, you know, when you are looking for a deliverable, you know, just try to be clear and try to be understanding, because there's a certain process of how to do things. But I understand if you're just like very early on, you don't want the architect to go full on and do like realistic renderings, then that's understandable. But just be clear on what you're looking for, and then I'm gonna get to that in a minute, where the architect can help you kind of define the deliverables so we are both on the same page. So now that we covered the list of what the client needs to prepare for, let's talk about what the architect needs to prepare for. So when you get into one of these calls with a client, you should always have a professional brief. When I say professional brief, you don't have to like read it off of a website or something, but at least be like, yeah, so you know, this is what I do. I work on this kind of projects. Like if the client is looking for a 5,000 square foot home and you only do ADUs, you're obviously not a good fit. So just tell them the kind of work that you do, and so they feel like they are hiring the right person with the right credentials and the right expertise. Then you should probably talk about your process brief. So this process brief is actually what I was just talking about when I was saying I work in 3D. If you ask me to design you a floor plan, I will for sure at some point need to get a 3D version of that, just so I make sure that everything is aligning, things are working, there's nothing clashing, because there's certain things that you can't really see, especially like when you get into areas like around the stairs, or when you have like different height of elevations. Those are tricky to visualize in 2D, and it's just good to look at it in 3D. And you know, sometimes the client is trying to like really save some money on the 3D, and you're like, you know, don't burn the fee, but then they end up spending a lot more time down the road during construction because they missed something, and that something could have been easily caught if they only had a 3D version of their house. So just talk about the process, be like, you know, this is what I do, this is how I work. So the architect needs to have a brief as well. You just, you know, tell them a little bit about what kind of style do you work on. Do you do contemporary? Do you do modern? Do you do art deco? I don't know, like what kind of style you work with. And usually before this call, the client needs to at least have seen your website or your portfolio, so your design styles are a little bit aligned. Because if you're looking for a farmhouse and the architect only does modern, then it can be a little bit tricky. I mean, they can do that, it's not impossible, but it's just a preference. Some clients, for example, I would not work on an art deco project, for example. It's just because I just don't have that in me to put that many details on a space. Like, I would enjoy it, I would go to an art deco place or an art deco house, but it's not something that I enjoy designing. So okay, then you should probably talk to your client about design phases, especially if they are doing the whole package and they're going to hire you for the entire project. You should walk them through the design phases, which is schematic design, where you're just kind of getting to know the site a little bit, trying to orient the house, where's the entrance, where's the main facade, just very basic things. And then you move to design development, where kind of developing the design and adding a little bit more details, adding a little bit more, you know, cabinetry, millwork, things like that. and then you move to CDs where you're adding a lot more details, you know, like how the walls are coming together, assemblies of ceilings, and you know, like the assemblies of, you know, windows, like another layers of technical information, you know, type of windows, door schedules, all that kind of stuff. And then there is bid where they pick what kind of GC they want to work with, and then there is CA, which is the construction administration, where the architect is involved in the construction and they are making sure that, you know, everything is going smoothly. If you're actually interested in knowing these design phases, go watch my Life of a Project video, or I talk a little bit more about the whole process of the project from the minute the client gets the idea to turning to giving them the keys, basically. Okay, so that was for design phases. Next, you should have some deliverable examples. This step is very important for the architect, because a lot of times you're gonna think that you and the client are on the same page, but you're actually not. So if you show them a deliverable set, like this is what you're gonna get, this cover page, you're gonna get general note, you're gonna get plans, you're gonna get elevation sections, they're not gonna come later and be like, well, this is not what we agreed on, because you're not just talking in the air. It's not abstract. You tell them, listen, are you present? Are you here with me? This is what you're gonna get. Do you agree? And then if they're like, okay, no, we had something else in mind, then you catch it now and you're like, okay, well, that's gonna be something different. It's not gonna be this type of deliverables, it's gonna be this type of deliverables. So it's always good to send them examples, because we don't wanna be surprised, especially if you're burned the fee already and then that's not what they were looking for. So always show deliverable examples. Then you should talk about a timeline of how you work. Like, what's your turnaround? Like, usually I would have a 1 week turnaround. If we talk today with a client, a week from now, I'm gonna have something for them. Whether it's a progress, whether it's a draft, I'm just not gonna go MIA for 2 weeks and then come up with something. Always communicate with your client. You should just like be talking to them throughout the week, you know, asking them questions. If something comes up, you're like, hey, you know, I was just like laying out the kitchen and I realized that you guys like this view. Do you want me to orient the kitchen this way? I don't know, something like that. But when you ask them questions throughout that week, it makes them feel comfortable that you're actually working on their project. But if you just like disappear for a whole week and then you come up with something, then they're gonna be like, well, you didn't even ask us. Like, all this time you didn't even have a single question. You know, that's like questionable. You didn't have a question, that's questionable. So yeah, just have a timeline, you know, like when they're gonna hear back from you, and just, you know, tell them that you in a week from now we're gonna have a call, but expect some text throughout the week of me asking you questions. Then you should cover your budget. Be like, this is my hourly rate, or if you do fixed project, or just, you know, give, for example, the deliverables that you saw earlier, this is how much I did it for. I don't think I'm gonna be able, like, you don't have to be on this, you don't have to give a price of that specific project on the spot, but just give them kind of a range. So the example of the deliverable, that one cost me 10K. So if you want something similar to that, it's gonna be around that ballpark. Now, it might vary. It might be a little bit more or a little bit less after this conversation that we're having. So I'm gonna tell them that you're gonna follow up with an accurate budget afterwards. But at least this gives them an idea that, you know, if they were like the $800 client, then you just like, you better hang up. It's like, there's no need to follow up with a budget. So if they tell you, okay, yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. Yeah, just, you know, we're gonna let you sit a little bit with the project and then come up with a game plan, then send them the price afterwards. And then you should talk about additional service. For additional services, it's very important to talk about, especially if you're doing a high ticket project. Like if you charge like 10K, 15K for a project, the client is just like gonna assume that it's gonna be like endless revisions. Like they can work with you for the next 4 years for 15K. Like it's not really that. Like, so really be very precise about, you know, the round of revisions, be precise about what's not included. Like if you don't do 3D renderings, tell them, hey, renderings are not included. It's gonna be a separate price and it's a la carte, you know, I'm charged $200 for an image. I don't think you should really penny pinch with the client where you're like, no, you know, I'm not gonna like do this revision because like the fee is over. Like, you should kind of be balanced. Like if the client is asking you for a small revision, then just fine, just do it. Don't be difficult. But if the client is like asking you like to fix something, and then you're like, okay, you know what, I don't have a fee, but I'm gonna happily do it because I like working with you. And then you do it, and then they're like, you know what, actually we don't like it, can we try this? They're like, okay, I can try it, but again, I don't have a fee for this, so I'm gonna do it. And then they're like, no, actually we're gonna try a third one. Okay, seriously, like now you're just taking advantage of your architect, and I don't think that's fair for anybody. Like, because the whole point, the reason why I'm actually putting this checklist here, and the reason why I'm being very transparent here, is for you to not resent the client and for the client to not resent you. There is nothing worse than actually having a client who paid you to give them a service, and then they feel like that was money wasted. Like, oh my God, that's like my biggest fear in the world. Like, if I work with a client, I want them to be like, I paid her and I would happily do it again. I want them to be like, that was the best money I ever spent. So we want to make the client feel like that was a good investment. And same thing for the architect. Like, we don't want the architect to be overworked and not compensated, because then they're not going to really enjoy working with you as a client, and they're going to resent you, and your project is going to be their lowest priority. And you don't want that. You don't want your project to be the lowest priority, because you're really putting your life savings here. You're really building something so meaningful for you and your family. So you really want to have a good team on your side. So I talked so much, but I really hope that was helpful, and I am gonna again share this in the description if you want to grab it. Again, just be a good person, be an honest person, be fair, have reasonable expectations. Don't try to sugarcoat things. If you don't know how to do something, just be like, I don't think this is my expertise, I can refer you to somebody. Yeah, just be a good, decent human being. And I'm sure, like, if you're the architect and you're just like really trying to scam the client, it's not good. Like, it's really gonna come bite you later down the road, because seriously, that 15K or that 10K is not worth a bad reputation. No money is worth ruining your name for. So communicate, tell them what they're gonna expect from you, make sure you understand what they're looking for, and then just have fun with it. That's pretty much my 2 cents on the architect client meeting. So I hope that was helpful. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, do all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna see you in the next one. All right, bye.